A millionaire decides to conduct a cruel test. He deliberately leaves his safe open with hundreds of thousands in cash to prove that his new poor cleaning lady will steal. When the employee's 7-year-old daughter climbs the stairs to investigate a strange noise, she finds the fortune temptingly exposed. The businessman hides in the shadows, ready to confirm his worst prejudices about poor people. But when the little girl's hands touch the money, his heart races at what he just witnessed. The sound of leather shoes echoed through the marble hallway as Edward Hayes adjusted his tie for the third time that cold Tuesday night. At 52, the businessman carried an invisible scar on his soul that ached more than any physical wound. The loss of his parents in an accident 3 years prior had left a void he tried to fill with the company of Christine, his girlfriend of 8 months. The 3-story mansion exuded opulence in every corner. Expensive paintings adorned the walls, crystal chandeliers hung from ornate ceilings, and the aroma of polished wood mingled with the French perfume Christine always wore. She descended the main staircase at that moment, gliding like a queen in her red dress that had cost more than many people earned in a year. "Darling, you seem tense," she said, approaching him with that smile that had captivated him at their first meeting. Her delicate fingers touched his face with a tenderness that seemed genuine, but there was something in her green eyes he couldn't quite decipher. "Are you thinking about the conversation we had yesterday?" Edward sighed deeply. The conversation. How could he forget? Christine had planted a seed of doubt in his mind about Mary Stevens, the new housekeeper who had only been working in the house for a week. A 35-year-old single mother who brought her 7-year-old daughter along because she had no one to leave her with. He remembered the first day, seeing the little girl playing quietly in the garden while her mother cleaned the rooms with impressive dedication. "You need to understand, Edward," Christine had insisted the night before, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the dining table. "People desperate for money are unpredictable. You're too kind, too trusting. But what if she took advantage of your generosity?" Her words echoed in his mind like a disturbing refrain. Edward had always prided himself on his ability to see the best in people, but his parents' death had left his emotions in tatters. Christine had appeared in his life like a balm for his pain, offering comfort when he needed it most. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps his generosity could be seen as a weakness. "The test we suggested, are you really going to do it?" Her voice interrupted his thoughts. There was a disguised anxiety in her tone, as if the answer were crucial for something greater. Edward looked toward the second floor, where his private office was located. His personal safe sat there, usually locked with a combination only he knew. The plan was simple and cruel at the same time. Leave the safe open with a significant amount of money in plain sight, create some noise to attract the girl's attention when she was alone, and observe from a hidden spot to see how she would react to the temptation. The idea made him feel disgusted with himself, but Christine's seductive voice had been persistent. "It's better to find out now than to have an unpleasant surprise later. You've already lost so much, darling. You can't afford to be betrayed again by trusting too much." I think so," he murmured, hating every word that came out of his mouth. "Mary will arrive in half an hour for the evening cleaning. Her daughter always comes along." Christine smiled, but there was something predatory in that expression that sent a chill down his spine. "You're doing the right thing, my love. Protection isn't paranoia, it's wisdom." As she headed to her car for the social engagement they had planned later, Edward slowly ascended the stairs toward the office. Each step felt heavy as lead. Upstairs, he opened the safe and gazed at the hundreds of thousands in neatly stacked bills. Was it really necessary to do this? A part of him screamed no, but another part, wounded and insecure, whispered that perhaps Christine was right. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. Mary had arrived, and with her daughter. The test was about to begin. Mary Stevens held firmly onto her daughter Sophia's small, cold hand as they walked through the mansion's side entrance. The cold night wind made the leaves dance in the perfectly manicured garden, creating shadows that moved like ghosts under the light of the ornate lampposts. Sophia looked at everything with wide eyes, impressed by the grandeur of the place where her mother worked. "Remember what we talked about on the bus, my sweet pea?" Mary whispered, kneeling down to the girl's height before opening the back door. "You stay quiet in the little room Mr. Hayes prepared for you. Don't touch anything, and if you need something, come find me, okay?" Sophia nodded, her brown curls swaying gently. She was a well-behaved and observant child who had learned early on not to bother adults. Her pale skin and slightly bluish lips hinted at the heart condition Mary kept hidden from everyone, fearing to lose work opportunities because of her daughter's fragile health. "The house is very beautiful, Mom," Sophia murmured as they entered. "It looks like a princess's castle." Mary's heart ached. How to explain to a 7-year-old child that all that beauty belonged to a world so distant from theirs? How to say that while some people lived in palaces, others shared a small, worn-down apartment in a less affluent part of the city? Edward watched everything from the top of the staircase, hidden behind a marble column. Seeing them arrive always touched him in a way he couldn't explain. Mary's dedication was evident in every movement, in the way she organized her cleaning supplies with military precision, in the loving way she settled Sophia in the small living room he had prepared especially for the girl. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes," Mary called, looking toward the upper floor. "We're on time." He descended the stairs with a forced smile, feeling like a traitor. Mary greeted him with the same respectful courtesy as always, but there was a genuine light in her eyes that made him question everything Christine had planted in his mind. "How is Sophia today?" he asked, kneeling before the girl. She observed him with curiosity, without fear, just with that natural frankness of children. "I'm good, Mr. Hayes," she answered softly. "Mommy said you're very kind because you let me and come along when I have nowhere to stay." The innocent words were like a stab to his heart. Here was a child thanking him for a basic kindness, something that cost him nothing, but for them it meant the difference between Mary having work or not. "Did you bring your coloring books?" he asked, trying to keep his voice normal. Sophia nodded animatedly and showed a small bag with some worn books and colored pencils that had seen better days. "Mommy said I can draw while she works." "I'm going to draw a castle just like your house." Mary blushed slightly. "Sophia, don't bother Mr. Hayes. He must be busy." "It's no bother at all," Edward responded, and for the first time that night his words came out sincerely. "You keep me company in this big house." As Mary began her cleaning routine, Edward went back up to the office. The safe was there, open with the money in plain sight like an obscene trap. His hands trembled as he arranged the bills even more temptingly. Hundreds of thousands of dollars deliberately spread out, an amount that would solve all that family's financial problems. For years, he positioned himself strategically behind a tall bookshelf, from where he could observe without being seen. The plan was simple. In a few minutes he would knock over some books to create noise, attracting Sophia's attention. When she came up to investigate, she would find the exposed treasure. What would she do? Christine was so certain that desperate people always reveal their true nature when given the chance. Downstairs, he could hear Mary humming softly as she vacuumed the living room. It was a sad and beautiful melody at the same time, full of hope despite the difficulties. Sophia had settled in the little room with her drawings, completely absorbed in creating her imaginary castle. Edward looked once more at the exposed money. Part of him wanted to close the safe immediately, forget that terrible idea, and simply trust the goodness he saw in that family's eyes. But Christine's voice echoed in his mind. "You've been hurt too much, darling. You can't afford to trust blindly." He took a deep breath and picked up 2 heavy books from the shelf. It was time to find out who these people really were. The crash of the falling books echoed through the mansion like thunder on a silent night. Edward felt his heart pound as he completely hid behind the bookshelf, barely able to breathe. Downstairs, the sound of the vacuum cleaner stopped abruptly. "Sophia?" Mary's worried voice echoed from the ground floor. "Is everything okay up there?" "I don't know, Mom," the girl's voice replied from the little room. "I think something fell." Edward closed his eyes, hating himself for every second of that sordid charade. He could hear Sophia's light footsteps ascending the marble staircase, her childish curiosity leading her directly to the trap he had set. Each step she climbed was like a stone being placed on his chest. "Mr. Hayes?" the sweet voice called when she reached the second floor. "Are you okay?" The hallway was dark, only illuminated by the light coming from the office with its door ajar. Sophia walked slowly, her worn ballet flats making almost no sound on the Persian rug. Edward could see her through a gap between the books, and what he observed left him breathless. The girl didn't run toward the money. Instead, she looked around with concern, as if searching for someone who might be injured. Her first reaction was not greed, but genuine concern for someone else's well-being. "Mr. Hayes?" she called again, more softly, as if afraid of waking someone who might be sleeping. It was then that she saw it. The open safe, the piles of bills, arranged like a fairy tale treasure. Sophia stopped at the office doorway, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly agape. For a long moment, she remained completely still, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Edward held his breath, prepared to witness the confirmation of Christine's worst prejudices. But what happened next shook him to the depths of his soul. Sophia slowly approached the safe, as if in a dream. Her small hands trembled as they extended toward the money, but not to take it. Instead, she touched one of the bills with her fingertips, as if to confirm it was real. Tears began to stream down her pale cheeks. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, using the expression she had learned from her mother. "It's real money. So much money." Edward watched as she closed her eyes, and more tears fell. The girl was mentally calculating, even at 7 years old. That amount could pay the rent for years. It could buy medicine. It could even pay for the heart test she knew she needed, but never spoke about to avoid worrying her mother. But then, something extraordinary happened. With immense care, Sophia began to collect every bill that Edward had purposefully scattered. Her hands trembled, but she organized everything with the precision of someone much older. Every bill was placed back in its original stack. Every stack perfectly aligned inside the safe. "Forgive me, dear Lord," she murmured as she closed the heavy safe door. "I don't want to do anything wrong. Mommy always says other people's money isn't ours, even if we need it desperately." Edward felt tears burn his eyes. Here was a 7-year-old child, daughter of a financially desperate family, rejecting a fortune out of pure moral integrity. Christine was completely wrong. People don't reveal their worst nature when they have an opportunity. Sometimes they reveal their best nature, even when no one is looking. Sophia wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked one last time at the closed safe. "Thank you for letting me see what a lot of money looks like," she whispered, as if talking to an invisible person. "But I can't take it. Mummy would be very sad with me." She turned to leave the office, but stopped at the door and looked back one more time. "One day, when I grow up, I'll work very hard to earn my own money. Then I'll be able to help other children who need medicine for their hearts." Edward had to cover his mouth with his hand to stifle a sob. The purity of that small soul had just destroyed years of prejudices he hadn't even known he carried. As Sophia carefully descended the stairs, he remained hidden, completely distraught. The test had revealed something, yes, but not about Sophia and Mary's character. It had revealed something about his own character, and he didn't like what he discovered at all. Edward remained hidden behind the bookshelf for long minutes after Sophia descended the stairs, his heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo through the mansion's silent corridors. The girl's words continued to reverberate in his mind like a haunting melody. "Mommy would be very sad with me." How could a 7-year-old child possess such a solid moral compass, while he, a 52-year-old man, had succumbed to Christine's poisonous whispers? His legs trembled when he finally emerged from his hiding place. The safe was closed, exactly as Sophia had left it. Not a single bill was out of place, no sign that an amount capable of transforming entire lives had been there, tempting and accessible. Only the accusing silence of his own conscience remained. Downstairs, he could hear Mary resuming her work, the vacuum cleaner coming back to life with its constant hum. Sophia had descended silently, without alerting her mother to what she had found. Another proof of her natural discretion, of her premature maturity forged by necessity. Edward descended the stairs with silent steps, an urgent need to observe more closely this family that had just shattered his certainties. He positioned himself discreetly behind a column from where he could see the small living room where Sophia had settled again with her drawings. The girl had gone back to coloring, but something had changed. Her movements were slower, more thoughtful. From time to time, she would stop and look toward the stairs, as if still processing what she had seen in the office. Her cheeks still bore traces of the tears she had shed before that fortune. "Sophia, my sweet pea." Mary appeared at the doorway of the small room, putting away her cleaning supplies. "I've finished the large living room. What a beautiful drawing you made." The girl held up the paper, showing a colorful castle with several windows and a tiny family in front. 3 simple figures drawn with colored pencils, a woman, a girl, and curiously, a tall man beside them. "Who is this one?" Mary asked, pointing to the 3rd figure. "It's Mr. Hayes," Sophia answered naturally. "He seems lonely in this big house. Thought maybe he could be part of our family too." Edward's heart clenched violently. How could that child perceive his loneliness so clearly? How could she show compassion for someone who had just tested her so cruelly? "My daughter," Mary sighed. Sitting beside her, "You have a very big heart. But Mr. Hayes is an important man, wealthy. He has his own life, his own family." "But he seems sad sometimes," Sophia insisted, still coloring. "Today, when I went upstairs to check the noise, I felt like he was nearby but hidden, as if he wanted company but didn't know how to ask." The girl's sharp perception sent a chill through Edward. She had sensed his presence in the office. How could a child be so intuitive? "Sophia?" Mary changed the subject gently. "Are you feeling well? Are you not tired? Is your little heart beating normally?" Edward saw Sophia automatically place her hand over her chest, a seemingly habitual gesture. "It's beating a little fast, Mum. I think it's because I got scared by the noise upstairs. Come here, let me listen." Mary leaned her ear to her daughter's chest, deep concern etching her face. "It's not irregular, thank dear Lord, but we need to schedule that doctor's appointment as soon as possible." "Mommy," Sophia asked softly, "will we ever have enough money to pay for my treatment?" The question cut the silence like a blade. Edward felt his blood run cold. Treatment? What treatment? Mary hugged her daughter tightly, trying to hide the tears that sprang instantly. "I don't know yet, my daughter. We'll ask dear Lord to help us. He always finds a way." I know he will help, Sophia replied, with an unwavering faith that contrasted starkly with the reality of her situation. But sometimes I'm scared my heart will stop working before we get the money. Edward had to lean on the column to keep from falling. The girl who had just rejected a fortune out of pure integrity desperately needed that same fortune to save her own life. The irony was devastating. The injustice was glaring. "Don't talk like that, my princess," Mary whispered, rocking her daughter gently. "Your heart is strong, and Mommy will work very, very hard to get the money for your surgery." "I know, Mommy, and when I get better, I'll help you work. I'll be the best helper in the world." Tears ran freely down Edward's face now. Here was a child condemned by a severe heart condition, promising to help her mother work when she recovered from a surgery they might never be able to afford. And yet, moments before, she had rejected the solution to all their problems out of pure honesty. Christine was not just wrong, she was criminally wrong. He had tested the integrity of angels while his manipulative girlfriend planted demons in his mind. The question that now tormented him was devastating. What to do with this transformative discovery? How could he look Christine in the eyes again, knowing she had tried to corrupt him against the most honest family he had ever known? Edward stayed awake until the early hours of that night, pacing restlessly through the mansion's empty corridors. Each step echoed like an accusation against his conscience. On his office desk, he had left a discreet envelope with a generous sum, the extra payment Mary would find the next day, unaware it was his desperate attempt to minimally alleviate the guilt that consumed him. When Christine called at 2 a.m, he almost didn't answer. "Darling, how was the test?" Her voice sounded anxious, almost hungry for details. "Did you find out anything interesting?" Edward hesitated, looking out the office window at the moonlit garden. The girl found the safe open. "And? Didn't I tell you that would happen?" Christine could barely contain her excitement. "People like them always reveal who they really are when given the opportunity. What did she do? How much did she take?" "She didn't take anything, Christine." The words came out heavy, laden with an emotion he couldn't quite name. The silence on the other end of the line was long and tense. "What do you mean, didn't take anything? Edward, are you telling me that a child from a poor family found hundreds of thousands in cash and just ignored it?" She closed the safe and asked dear Lord for forgiveness for having seen other people's money. His voice cracked slightly. "Christine, she's only 7 years old and she showed more integrity than many adults we know." Edward, my love." Her voice changed, becoming softer, more manipulative. "You're being naive again." Perhaps she knew she was being watched. Children are smarter than they seem. Or maybe she was afraid of being caught. The suggestion deeply irritated him. "She didn't know I was watching, and even if she did, her reaction was pure honesty. Christine, she has a severe heart condition. She needs surgery and the family can't afford it. Even so, she rejected that money." "Heart condition?" Christine's voice grew colder. "How did you know that?" Edward realized too late that he had revealed he'd overheard the conversation. I accidentally overheard them talking." "You heard them talking and didn't tell me immediately?" Her irritation was palpable. "Edward, don't you see what's happening? This story about an illness could be an act, a way to arouse your compassion, to make you drop your guard." "You didn't see what I saw, Christine. The girl's paleness, the way she automatically places her hand on her chest, the mother's genuine concern. It's not an act. My love, you're being emotionally manipulated." Her voice was now firm, authoritative. "That's exactly how opportunistic people operate. They create situations that evoke pity, that make kind men like you want to help. And then, when you least expect it, they show their true intentions." Edward sank heavily into the office armchair. Part of him wanted to believe Christine's words, wanted her to be right because that would be simpler. But the image of Sophia carefully closing the safe and asking dear Lord for forgiveness remained etched in his mind. "Perhaps you're right," he lied, feeling disgusted with himself. "Maybe I am being manipulated. Of course I'm right, darling. That's why you need me, to protect you from your own excessive kindness." Her tone became sweeter again. "But don't worry, we'll find out the truth about them. Tomorrow, I want you to conduct another test." "Another test?" His heart pounded. "Yes, leave some valuables scattered around the house. Nothing too obvious, but things a dishonest person might take, thinking they wouldn't be noticed. An expensive watch on a table, some jewelry in the bathroom, cash in open drawers." The suggestion revolted him. "Christine, I don't think that's necessary." "Edward," her voice hardened again, "either you want to find out the truth about these people, or you don't. If you really care about your security and your assets, you'll do what I'm suggesting, unless you've already decided to trust them blindly." The manipulation was evident, yet effective. Edward felt trapped between his intuition, which screamed that Sophia and Mary were honest people, and Christine's insistence, which planted seeds of doubt in his mind, already weakened by the loss of his parents. I'll think about it," he murmured. "There's nothing to think about, my love. Either you do it, or I'll start to suspect you're developing inappropriate feelings for this family, which would be very worrying, considering the social difference between you." The insinuation infuriated him, but he swallowed his anger. "It's nothing like that, Christine." "Then prove it. Do the test tomorrow, and this time tell me everything that happens. No omissions." Dumb. After hanging up the phone, Edward was left alone with his torturous thoughts. Christine's voice echoed in his mind, mingling with the memory of Sophia's sweet voice asking dear Lord for forgiveness. Two completely opposite realities competed for his loyalty. Outside, dawn began to tint the sky pink. In a few hours, Mary and Sophia would arrive again, bringing with them that purity that both disturbed and comforted him. He would have to choose. Trust the calculated manipulation of a woman who claimed to love him, or the crystal-clear honesty of a child who didn't even know she was being tested. The choice would define not only the fate of 3 lives, but also definitively reveal who Edward Hayes truly was, deep in his soul. The next morning brought a fine rain that made the mansion windows weep crystal tears. Edward had spent the night awake, alternating between moments of clarity, where he clearly saw Christine's manipulation, and periods of confusion, where the doubts she had planted grew like weeds in fertile soil. When Mary arrived with Sophia, he observed them discreetly from the window. The girl seemed paler than usual, her steps were slightly slower, and Edward noticed how she occasionally stopped to take a deep breath. The heart condition was not an act. It was a cruel reality that manifested in every delicate movement of that child. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." Mary greeted him with the same warm smile as always when he came down to meet them. "Thank you so much for the envelope you left yesterday. You didn't have to, but it was very kind of you." His heart clenched. She had found the extra money, and instead of simply keeping it, made a point of thanking him, once again demonstrating her complete transparency. "It was just a recognition of your excellent work," Edward replied, kneeling before Sophia. "And how is our artist today? Did you bring more drawings?" Sophia smiled, but Edward noticed that the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. I drew our conversation from yesterday." She showed a paper with 3 figures. A woman working, a girl sitting with colored pencils, and a man observing from a distance, partially hidden behind a column. Edward froze. The drawing was surprisingly accurate. Sophia had captured his exact position when he was observing them the night before. You saw me yesterday?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "I didn't see well, but I felt you were near," Sophia replied naturally. "Sometimes you can tell when someone's watching, right? But I thought it was nice. It seemed like you liked watching Mom work and me draw, like we were a real family." The innocent words were like a stab. Edward stood up quickly, muttering an excuse about having work to do. He went up to the office, with his heart pounding, but was interrupted by the phone ringing. "Edward, darling, I've been thinking all night about our conversation." Christine's voice sounded different, more determined, more dangerous. "I've decided I need to come over today to see these people with my own eyes." "I don't think that's a good idea," he replied quickly. "They might suspect something's going on." "Exactly what I expected you to say." Her tone grew cold. "Edward, are you protecting them or protecting me? Because your reaction is making me question many things about our relationship." The implicit threat hit him like a slap. "Christine, it's not protection. It's just common sense. Common sense would be to find out if these people are trustworthy before it's too late. But I'll respect your decision for now. Instead, I want you to do something different." Edward closed his eyes, dreading what would come next. "I want you to tell them about a fictitious financial problem. Say you're going through difficulties, that you might have to let employees go. See how they react. Honest people show genuine concern. Opportunistic people start acting differently when they believe there's nothing more to be gained." The suggestion was cruel and brilliant at the same time. "Christine, they might get really worried. Mary needs this job." Exactly. And it's precisely that need that will reveal whether they are honest or manipulative. If she's truly honest, she'll show sincere concern for your well-being, not just her own job. Edward sat down heavily. Christine's logic was perverse, but it had a coherence that confused him. What if they are really honest? I'll cause unnecessary suffering. Then you'll discover you have loyal employees, and you can compensate them later. But if you discover they're opportunistic, you'll have gotten rid of a problem before it gets bigger. For 2 hours, Christine continued to pressure him, alternating between subtle threats about their relationship and seemingly logical arguments about protection and prudence. She mentioned cases of other wealthy men who had been deceived by seemingly honest employees. She spoke about the need to protect the assets he had built with such effort. When he finally hung up the phone, Edward was mentally and emotionally exhausted. Christine's words had mingled with his own insecurities, creating a toxic confusion in his mind. He descended the stairs like a man walking to his own funeral. Mary was cleaning the library, humming softly a song he didn't recognize, but which sounded like a prayer. Sophia was in the small room, drawing another of her imaginary castles. "Mary," he called, his voice hoarse, "I need to talk to you about a delicate situation." She turned, her face immediately worried. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. Did something happen?" The next words that came out of his mouth would define everything. Edward looked at this woman who worked so hard to support her sick daughter, then looked toward the small room where Sophia was drawing her colorful dreams. He was about to lie to two people who had only shown honesty and kindness. And worst of all, a part of him desperately wanted to find out Christine was right, because that would be easier than admitting he had been manipulated against his own generous nature. Edward opened his mouth to begin the lie Christine had meticulously orchestrated, but the words died in his throat when he saw the genuinely worried expression on Mary's face. She had immediately dropped what she was doing and approached him with the full attention of someone who truly cared about another person's well-being. "Mr. Hayes, you're pale," she said, gently touching his arm. "Do you want me to make you some tea? Or would you prefer I call a doctor?" Her concern was so authentic, so maternal, that Edward felt something break inside his chest. How could he lie to someone who showed genuine care for him before even knowing what was wrong? "Mary, He stopped, looking deeply into her eyes. They were honest eyes, tired from life's difficulties, but crystal clear in their kindness. Actually, it's not about work. It was then that Sophia appeared at the library door, holding her latest drawing. "Mr. Hayes, are you sad? Can I draw something to cheer you up?" Edward looked at her, that fragile child with the ailing heart, who had rejected a fortune out of pure integrity, offering to comfort him with the only wealth she possessed, her innocent art. Something exploded within him, not anger, not frustration, but a crystal clarity that swept away all the doubts planted by Christine like a hurricane clearing the sky after a storm. "Sophia, Mary," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I need to tell you about something terrible I did." The two looked at him with curiosity, without fear, just with the respectful attention of people accustomed to listening with their hearts. "Last night I purposely left my safe open. I made noise to attract Sophia to the office. I was hidden, watching, to see if she would take the money." The silence that followed was deafening. Mary blinked several times, processing the information, while Sophia tilted her head to the side with that thoughtful expression he had already learned to recognize. You were testing if I'm honest?" Sophia asked with the brutal frankness of children. "Yes," Edward whispered, collapsing into a chair. "And not just that. My girlfriend. She convinced me that people in your situation, she said I should distrust you." Mary sat down slowly, still holding the cleaning cloth, her face a mixture of sadness and understanding. "And we failed the test, Mr. Hayes." The innocent question was like a stab to his heart. "No, you..." Sophia closed the safe and asked dear Lord for forgiveness for having seen money that wasn't hers, even knowing that you desperately need money for her treatment. Tears began to stream down his face uncontrollably. "You are the most honest people I have ever known, and I treated you like criminals because a manipulative woman planted horrible prejudices in my mind." Sophia dropped her drawing and ran to him, hugging his legs with all the strength her small arms could muster. "Don't cry, Mr. Hayes. Mommy always says everyone makes mistakes sometimes. The important thing is to admit it and ask for forgiveness." "How can you forgive me?" he sobbed, picking her up. "How can you be so kind to me after what I did?" "Because you're truly crying," Sophia responded, wiping a tear from his face with her small hand. "Bad people don't cry when they hurt others. They're happy." Mary approached and placed a hand on Edward's shoulder. "Mr. Hayes, you were hurt before, weren't you? Someone took advantage of your kindness and hurt you very much." He nodded, unable to speak. "Hurt people sometimes do things to protect themselves, even when it hurts innocent people. But you are not a bad person. A bad person wouldn't be here apologizing with real tears in their eyes." "I want to help you," Edward said, finally finding his voice. "Sophia's treatment, your needs, everything. But not out of guilt, because you deserve it. You don't have to..." Mary began, but he interrupted her. "Yes, I do. Not for what I did, but for what you are. And there's one more thing." He took a deep breath. "Christine, my girlfriend, she doesn't stop here. She wants me to run more tests. She wants me to lie to you about financial problems. She's trying to turn me into someone I'm not." Sophia looked at him with that precocious wisdom that haunted him. "Then you'll have to choose, won't you, Mr. Hayes, between the person who makes you do bad things and the people who make you want to be good." The simple truth spoken by a 7-year-old child echoed through the library like a cathedral bell. Edward Hayes had reached the turning point of his life, and for the first time in months, he knew exactly what he needed to do. That same afternoon, Edward made his first courageous decision in months. He scheduled a private consultation with the city's best pediatric cardiologist for Sophia, arranged for comprehensive examinations, and authorized all costs to be charged to his personal account. But he knew this would only be the first battle in a much larger war against Christine's manipulations. "Mr. Hayes," Mary whispered when he explained about the medical appointment, "I don't know how to thank you, but are you sure? It's a lot of money, and we're just—" "You are my family now," Edward interrupted gently, "and family takes care of each other." Sophia, who'd been listening from the library door, ran to him with shining eyes. "Really, Mr. Hayes? We're going to be a family just like in my drawing?" "If you'll accept me, even after everything I did," he replied, kneeling down to her. Height. The answer came in the form of a hug that lasted eternal seconds, small arms squeezing his neck with a strength that contrasted with the girl's physical fragility. But Edward knew Christine wouldn't give up easily. She had invested a lot of time molding his mind, and losing control over him would represent more than just the end of a relationship. It would represent the end of her calculated financial plans. The phone rang at 7 o'clock that evening, precisely as always. "Darling, how was the conversation with your employee? I hope you found out interesting things about her true character." Edward took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. "Christine, we need to talk, in person." "Of course, my love. It's good that you finally want to include me more in the situation. I'll be there in half an hour." Her tone was triumphant, as if she already knew she had won another psychological battle. Edward hung up the phone with trembling hands, not from fear but from a determination he hadn't felt in years. When Christine arrived, she was radiant. She wore a designer dress that had cost more than Mary earned in 3 months, and her eyes gleamed with that thirst for power that Edward could finally see clearly. "So, darling, tell me everything. Did the poor family act work? Did they show their true colors when you mentioned financial difficulties?" "I didn't lie to them, Christine." Her smile faltered for just a second. "What do you mean you didn't lie?" "Edward, we agreed. We didn't agree on anything. You manipulated, and I was weak enough to almost give in." The silence that followed was glacial. Christine studied him with eyes that had become 2 sharp blades, quickly calculating her next attack strategy. "Edward, my love," she said, switching to that soft, concerned tone she used when she felt she was losing ground, "you are clearly under the emotional influence of these people. They managed to manipulate you exactly as I warned you they would. Christine, a 7-year-old child, rejected hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pure honesty, and you want me to believe that's manipulation?" "Exactly." Her eyes gleamed, as if she'd found a loophole. "Don't you see how it's too perfect? A sick child, a struggling mother, a theatrical rejection of money. Edward, this is emotional manipulation of the highest level." Her persistence in distorting reality nauseated him. "Sophia has a severe heart condition. She could die if she doesn't have the surgery, and yet she rejected the money that would save her life. How can that be manipulation?" "Oh, darling," Christine laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the room. "Do you really believe a 7-year-old child has all that purity? Children are taught by their parents to play roles. This girl was trained to react exactly like that, knowing you were watching." "She didn't know I was watching." "Of course, she did." "Edward, you're being naive to the point of irresponsibility. These people identified that you're a lonely rich man with emotional wounds. They're executing a plan to take advantage of you." Edward stood up, walking to the window. Outside, he could see the city lights, millions of people living their lives, some honest, others not. But for the first time in months, he knew how to distinguish between the two. "Christine, Sophia drew a picture of me observing them yesterday. If she knew I was testing her honesty, why would she draw that? Why draw attention to the fact that she saw me? Because, Christine responded with forced patience, that way, she plants the idea that even knowing she was being watched, she was still honest. It's reverse psychology, Edward. Her ability to twist any evidence to support her poisonous narrative was impressive. Edward finally understood that he was dealing with someone who would never admit being wrong, someone who would prefer to destroy his peace of mind than lose control over him. You know what else, Christine? Even if you were right, and you're not, I'd rather be deceived by genuinely kind people than continue to be manipulated by someone who uses my love as a weapon against my own nature. Her face completely changed, the mask of loving concern, dropping to reveal a calculating coldness that made him recoil instinctively. Be careful what you're saying, Edward. You're making a decision you might regret for the rest of your life. The implicit threat was clear. The war had officially begun. In the 3 days that followed the confrontation, Edward experienced a peace he hadn't felt in months. Sophia had begun her medical examinations, and, despite the severity of her condition, the doctors were optimistic about the surgery's chances of success. Mary worked with even greater dedication, as if every movement was a form of silent gratitude. The mansion had transformed from an elegant mausoleum into a home where children's laughter now echoed through the halls. But Edward had underestimated the revenge of a woman accustomed to always getting what she wanted. On Thursday morning, when Mary arrived with Sophia, she looked different. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes red, as if she'd cried all night. Sophia, in turn, hid behind her mother, observing everything with that keen intuition that made her seem older than her 7 years. "Mary, did something happen?" Edward asked, immediately noticing the change. She hesitated, biting her lower lip in a clear attempt to decide whether or not to tell him what was bothering her. "Mr. Hayes, last night, a woman showed up at the apartment building where we live." Edward's blood ran cold. "What woman?" "She said she was your girlfriend, that she came to warn me about some things I should know about you." Tears began to stream down Mary's face. "She said you had a habit of taking advantage of vulnerable women." Edward clenched his fists, rage pounding in his temples. "Mary, look at me. What else did she say?" "She showed pictures of other women, Mr. Hayes. Poor women, she said. You had helped before. She said it always ended badly, that you would get tired and abandon them in a worse situation than before." The perversity of Christine's lie was impressive. She had fabricated an entire narrative, complete with forged evidence, to destroy the trust he had so painstakingly earned. "And she said more," Mary continued, her voice broken, "that I should be very careful, because men like you only see women like me as temporary amusement, that when you got tired of playing at being kind, you'd discard us like trash." Sophia came out from behind her mother and ran to Edward, hugging his legs as she always did. "I told Mom that the bad woman was lying, Mr. Hayes. People who truly do good don't have sad eyes like yours sometimes do. Bad people never get sad." The pure wisdom of the girl contrasted brutally with Christine's venomous sophistication. Edward knelt down, looking directly into Mary's eyes. "Mary, every word she said was a calculated lie to separate us. You are the first true family I've had since I lost my parents. Why would I destroy the only good thing that has happened in my life in recent years?" I want to believe you," Mary whispered, "but she showed papers, documents. She said she could prove everything she was saying." "Forged documents," Edward replied with absolute certainty. "Mary, you know me. In all these days, have I ever shown anything but genuine respect and affection for you?" "No, Mr. Hayes, never." Her tears fell more intensely now. But she said that was part of the game, that you were very smart, that you knew exactly how to gain people's trust before hurting them. Edward realized the perverse genius of Christine's attack. She had turned every kindness of his into evidence, a future manipulation. Anything positive he did would be interpreted as part of a sinister plan. "Did she say anything else?" he asked, fearing the answer. Mary swallowed hard. "She said that if I was smart, I should take some valuable things from the house as collateral, to protect myself when you got tired of us. She said all other rich men do this with employees, that it's practically expected." The trap was complete. Christine had planted the idea of theft directly into Mary's mind, creating a situation where any action would be interpreted against Edward. If Mary took something, she would be a thief. If she didn't, it would be because she was being manipulated by him. "And what did you say to her?" Edward asked. "I said I'd rather starve than steal from someone who had been kind to me and my daughter. I said that if you wanted to send us away, you only had to ask, and I would leave, grateful for everything you'd done for us." Sophia looked at Edward with that seriousness that always impressed him. The woman got very angry when Mom said that. "Mr. Hayes, she got red and used bad words. Good people don't get angry when other people are honest." Edward hugged them both, feeling a mixture of pride and terror. Pride for their unwavering integrity, terror for what Christine would be capable of now that her first attack had failed. "Girls," he said, using the affectionate term he felt in his heart for the first time, "you're going to have to be very brave. Because this woman isn't going to stop here. She's going to try to separate us, no matter what. We won't let her." Sophia replied with a fierce determination that contrasted with her physical fragility. "You're our chosen dad now, and families stick together when bad people try to separate them." Edward looked out the window, seeing dark clouds forming in the sky. The literal storm approaching was nothing compared to the emotional storm Christine was brewing. She had declared war not only against him, but against two innocent people. And he knew that a woman capable of fabricating evidence and threatening a sick child was capable of anything. Edward spent Friday morning obsessively researching Christine in his office computers. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. 3 lawsuits archived due to lack of conclusive evidence against her, all involving similar accusations: defamation, slander, and attempted extortion against wealthy men who had ended relationships with her. The pattern was eerily familiar. Christine would approach lonely and vulnerable men, gain their trust, and then use intimate information against them when the relationship ended or when she identified that they possessed something she desired. In each case, honest employees were unjustly accused of theft. At 6 in the morning, Edward called Robert Miller, the private investigator he had used years before for business matters. "Robert, I need everything you can get on Christine Almeida Vasconcelos. Everything. And I need it today." "Edward, it's 6 in the morning. It must be serious. It's a matter of life or death, Robert, literally." At 9 o'clock, when Mary arrived with Sophia, Edward had already taken protective measures. He had installed discreet security cameras in all rooms of the house and hired private security guards to monitor the property. He had also contacted his family lawyer to begin documenting all of Christine's actions. "Good morning, girls," he said, hugging Sophia and respectfully kissing Mary's forehead. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Mary replied. But Edward noticed that she still carried the tension from the conversation with Christine. "I thought a lot about everything we discussed yesterday, Mr. Hayes, and I decided I'm going to trust what my heart tells me about you." "And what does your heart say?" "That a person who truly cries when asking for forgiveness, who plays with a child on the floor, who asks about medicine and worries about doctor's appointments, that person cannot be bad, the way that woman said." Sophia tugged on Edward's shirt sleeve. "Mr. Hayes, I had a strange dream last night. I dreamed the bad. Woman came back, but this time she brought other bad people with her. And they wanted to have Mom arrested. Edward's heart stopped. Children sometimes had intuitions that adults ignored as impossible. What kind of people, Sophia? Police officers. And they said Mom had stolen things from your house. Edward exchanged a worried look with Mary. If Christine was capable of fabricating documents, she was certainly capable of fabricating evidence of theft. And if she managed to get Mary arrested, Sophia would be left alone, vulnerable, possibly taken to a shelter where she wouldn't receive the necessary medical treatment. Mary, he said, his voice serious, I want you to know that, no matter what happens, you two are safe. I've hired the best lawyers in the city. If anyone tries to accuse you of anything, we have full legal protection. At that moment, the phone rang. Robert. Edward, you were right to be worried. Christine Almeida Vasconcelos isn't just a manipulative woman. She's being investigated by the FBI for fraud and criminal conspiracy. Apparently, she's part of an organization that specializes in running scams on wealthy men using employees as scapegoats. Edward felt the world spin. What do you mean, Robert? The scheme works like this. She gains the trust of a wealthy man, plants evidence of theft against honest employees, creates situations where the man feels obliged to compensate her for the losses, and then disappears with the money. If the man tries to report it, she uses intimate information about him for blackmail. And the employees? They're usually fired without references, sometimes arrested based on forged evidence. Some cases even resulted in suicide out of despair. Edward, this woman systematically destroys lives. Edward looked at Mary and Sophia, who were playing with puzzles in the small living room, completely oblivious to the danger that threatened them. Robert, she's going to try to frame Mary for theft. I'm sure of it. That's to be expected. Edward, you need to know that Christine has connections with dangerous people. If she feels cornered, she might escalate the situation beyond mere evidence. Fabrication. What do you mean? Kidnapping, Edward. In 2 of the previous cases, when the men refused to pay, close family members mysteriously disappeared for a few days. They always returned safe and sound, after the payment was made, of course. But the message was clear. Edward felt his blood run cold. Sophia, Christine would be capable of kidnapping a sick child to force him to give in to her demands. Robert, I want 24-hour protection for Mary and Sophia, the best professionals you can get. I'm already arranging it. Edward, there's one more thing. I managed to get a recording of Christine admitting the scheme to an accomplice. It's enough evidence to arrest her, but we need to wait for the right moment to use it. Edward hung up the phone with a mixture of relief and terror. He had evidence to destroy Christine, but he knew she wouldn't go quietly. A woman accustomed to always winning wouldn't accept defeat without a brutal final battle. Mr. Hayes, Sophia appeared by his side. You're worried again. Can I do anything to help? Edward picked her up, looking at that pure child who had become the center of a war between good and evil that she didn't even fully comprehend. You help just by existing, my princess. Just keep being exactly who you are. I will, and I'll protect Mommy too, because now we're a family, and families protect each other. Edward hugged Sophia tighter, knowing that in the next few hours he would discover how far an unscrupulous person would go to get what she wanted, and fearing that the innocence of that child might not be enough to protect her from the approaching malice. The third major development happened the following Monday, exactly as Sophia had dreamed. Edward was in his office when he heard the sudden screech of tires outside the mansion. Through the window, he saw 2 police cruisers and a black car he recognized immediately. Christine was in the passenger seat, a triumphant smile on her face. 4 police officers walked toward the main entrance, led by a detective Edward didn't recognize. Behind him, Christine walked with the posture of someone who had just won an important battle. "Mary, Sophia!" Edward shouted, running down the stairs. "Come here, quick!" The two appeared from the kitchen, Mary wiping her hands on her apron and Sophia carrying one of her drawings. When they saw the police through the window, Mary's face turned ashen. "Mr. Hayes, what's happening?" "Exactly what you dreamed, Sophia," he murmured, picking up the girl. "But don't be afraid. We're prepared." The doorbell rang authoritatively, followed by loud knocks on the door. Edward took a deep breath and opened it, finding the detective with a serious expression and Christine with eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "Edward Hayes?" the detective asked. "Yes, that's me." "Detective Carter, we've received a formal complaint of theft against your domestic employee, Mary Stevens. We're here to execute a search warrant." Edward felt Mary tremble behind him, but he kept his voice firm. "What kind of complaint, detective?" Christine stepped forward, her voice full of false concern. "Edward, darling, I know it's hard to accept, but I found several of your jewels at this woman's apartment. I had to do the right thing and report it." "That's a lie!" Mary exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. "I've never stolen anything in my life." "Of course, she'll deny it," Christine replied disdainfully. "They all deny it when they're caught." Sophia, still in Edward's arms, looked directly at Christine with a seriousness that impressed even the police officers. "You are a liar, and dear Lord doesn't like liars who hurt sick children." "Detective," Edward interjected, "I'd like to see the warrant, please." While examining the document, Edward noticed something that reassured him. It was a legitimate warrant, but based only on Christine's testimony. There was no concrete evidence presented, only allegations. "Detective, before proceeding with the search, I'd like to present some information that might be relevant to this case." Edward handed him an envelope he had prepared that morning. "These are documents proving a pattern of behavior by the complainant." The detective opened the envelope, and his expression gradually changed. They were copies of previous lawsuits against Christine, records of her suspicious activities, and, most importantly, excerpts from the recording where she admitted fabricating evidence against domestic employees. "Christine Almeida Vasconcelos," the detective said, staring at her. "You didn't mention you're being investigated by the FBI for fraud." Christine's triumphant smile faltered for the first time. "That has nothing to do with this specific case." "On the contrary, it has everything to do with it." The detective turned to Edward. "Mr. Hayes, we have to execute the warrant, but in light of this information, I'm requesting that a forensic expert accompany the entire search to ensure there's no evidence planting." Edward saw panic begin to settle in Christine's eyes. She hadn't expected him to be so well prepared. "Detective," Edward continued, "I'd also like to put on record that I've installed security cameras throughout the property. All activities from the past few days are recorded, including Ms. Vasconcelos's attempts to convince Mary to take valuables as collateral." Now Christine was visibly nervous. "Edward, you're making things up to protect a thief." "Then you won't. Mind if we watch the recordings?" The detective responded coldly. For the next 2 hours, the house was meticulously searched. No evidence of theft was found in Mary's home, nor in her personal belongings. The security cameras clearly showed that Mary had never taken anything that wasn't her own work supplies. More importantly, the recordings perfectly captured the conversation where Christine tried to convince Mary to take valuables, and Mary's categorical rejection of the suggestion. "Ms. Vasconcelos," the detective finally said, "based on the evidence presented and the lack of any proof of theft, I'm dismissing this complaint. Furthermore, I'll be forwarding this case to the FBI, who are already investigating your activities." Christine exploded. "This isn't over. Edward, you don't know who..." you're dealing with. This miserable family isn't worth destroying what we have together." Sophia, who had remained silent during the entire search, got down from Edward's lap and walked over to Christine. With her sweet child's voice, but with a wisdom that impressed everyone, she said, "Ma'am, Mommy taught me that. When you do bad things, your heart gets heavy and full of anger. You seem very tired from carrying so much meanness. If you stop doing bad things, you'll feel better." The silence that followed was absolute. A 7-year-old child had offered forgiveness and wisdom to someone who had tried to destroy her family. Christine looked at Sophia as if she had seen a ghost, then turned and left the house without another word. Edward hugged Mary and Sophia, knowing that the battle had been won, but also knowing that women like Christine rarely gave up completely. The war was not yet over. 3 days after Christine's public humiliation, Edward received a call that made him understand she had saved her final card for the moment she felt completely cornered. Edward, her voice was different, devoid of her usual seductive manipulation, replaced by a deadly coldness. "You won this battle, but you haven't won the war yet. Christine, it's over. The FBI already has enough evidence to arrest you. Accept defeat and move on." "Move on!" she laughed, a sound that chilled his blood. "Edward, do you really think I'm just going to disappear and let you live happily ever after like a fairy tale family?" Edward felt a knot in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "I mean your precious Sophia didn't make it to school today." Edward's world stopped, literally stopped. The phone almost slipped from his trembling hands as the reality of Christine's words slowly penetrated his terrified consciousness. What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything, darling. I just arranged for her to be taken to a safe place where you can have a civilized conversation about the future of all of us." Edward ran to the window, desperately looking for Mary's car. She had left 2 hours ago to take Sophia to the doctor for pre-operative exams. His heart pounded when he saw only Mary's car parked in the driveway, and she was walking toward the house with faltering steps, her face devastated by tears. "Edward," Christine's voice continued, now with a sadistic satisfaction, "your little friend Mary will be there in a few seconds. She has an interesting story to tell about how she lost a child in the middle of a crowded hospital." Edward dropped the phone and ran to meet Mary, who entered the house like a ghost, her gaze completely lost. "Edward," she cried, falling to her knees, "they took my daughter." At the hospital, while I was talking to the nurse, 2 men approached Sophia and said they were from the lab, that they needed to take her for a special test. When I finished filling out the paperwork and went to look for her, "Mary, breathe," Edward said, kneeling beside her. "We'll get Sophia back. I promise you." The phone rang again. Edward answered with trembling hands. "Now that I have your full attention," Christine said, "let's discuss the conditions. You will transfer $5 million to an account I will send you. You will sign a document declaring that Mary stole valuable items from your house, and you will publicly testify that everything I said about you was true." "Christine, she's a sick child. How could you do this?" "I can do it because you forced me to. If you had simply accepted my guidance from the start, none of this would be necessary. But you chose this destitute family over me." Edward looked at Mary, who was crying silently and felt a fury he had never experienced in his entire life. "Where is she?" "Somewhere safe, receiving all necessary medical care. My associates know about her heart condition. We don't want anything to happen to our little collateral. If you hurt her, Edward, I won't hurt her. But I also can't guarantee that my associates have the same patience I do, especially if you take too long to accept my conditions." At that moment, Mary stood up with a determination that impressed Edward. She took the phone from his hands and spoke directly to Christine. "Listen closely, you demon. Mary's voice came out hoarse but firm. "I don't know what kind of person you think you are, but I will go to the ends of the earth for my daughter if I have to. And when I find her, you'll discover what a mother is capable of doing to protect her child." Edward saw a primal, fierce strength emerge from Mary, something he had never seen before. The gentle and submissive woman had transformed into a lioness defending her cub. "Mary," Christine laughed on the other end of the line, "you're a housekeeper with no resources, no connections, no power. What exactly do you think you can do against me?" "I can pray," Mary replied simply. "And when a mother prays for her kidnapped child, God moves heaven and earth to answer her." The silence that followed was long. Finally, Christine spoke again, but her voice had lost some of its previous confidence. "You have 6 hours to give me an answer. After that, I can't guarantee Sophia's safety." The line went dead. Edward looked at Mary, who had fallen to her knees again, but this time in prayer. Her whispered words echoed through the mansion. "Dear Lord, protect my girl. She is pure, she is innocent. Don't let the evil of these people hurt her." Edward knelt beside her. For the first time in years, he also prayed, asking for strength, wisdom, and most importantly, that an innocent child be protected from the malice of unscrupulous adults. They had 6 hours to save Sophia, and Edward knew these would be the 6 most important hours of his life. What Christine didn't know was that Robert, Edward's private investigator, had begun tracking her every move since the first confrontation. When Edward called desperately reporting the kidnapping, Robert already had security teams positioned at 3 suspicious locations where Christine might have taken Sophia. "Edward, we found her," Robert said over the phone 2 hours after the disappearance. "She's in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial zone with 2 armed men. But there's a problem." "What problem?" "Sophia is feeling unwell. Through the listening devices, we could hear she's having difficulty breathing. The emotional tension might have triggered a cardiac crisis." Edward felt his world collapse. "Robert, we have to get her out of there now." "I've already contacted the FBI. They're setting up a rescue operation, but it will take at least an hour." "Edward, I don't know if Sophia has an hour." Mary, who had listened to the entire conversation, stood up with a determination that impressed both men. "Then we're going ourselves." "Mary, it's too dangerous." "Edward," she interrupted him, "that child is my life. If there's a possibility she'll die while we wait for official help, I'd rather die trying to save her than live knowing I didn't. Do everything I could." 30 minutes later, Edward, Mary, and 2 of Robert's security teams positioned themselves around the warehouse. Through listening devices, they could hear Sophia's labored breathing and the tense discussions between Christine and her accomplices. "She's turning purple," one of the men's voices sounded nervous. "Christine, this girl could die here." "Then Edward will have to decide quickly if he wants to pay or explain how he let a child die out of stubbornness," Christine replied coldly. "I didn't sign up to kidnap a sick child," another man protested. "This has gotten way too serious." Edward signaled the security team. The plan was simple: create a distraction at the front of the warehouse while he and Mary entered through the back to rescue Sophia before the FBI arrived with all the equipment that could scare the child even more. What happened next was like a choreographed miracle. At the exact moment Edward silently forced open the back door, Sophia, even amidst her respiratory crisis, began to speak in a weak but clear voice. "Please don't fight because of me. I don't want anyone to get hurt. Mommy always says that when you forgive bad people, they stop being bad." Edward saw Christine with her back to him, watching Sophia, who was sitting in a chair, pale but conscious. The 2 armed men seemed genuinely disturbed by the situation. "Kid, shut up," one of them murmured, but without aggression. "I can't shut up," Sophia replied softly, "because I need to tell you that Jesus loves you even when you do bad things. And if you let me go home, I'll ask him to forgive you." It was at that moment that Christine turned and saw Edward. For a second, their eyes met, and for the first time since he had known her, Edward saw something beyond calculation and manipulation in that gaze. He saw a lost, frightened woman who had gone too far and no longer knew how to turn back. "Edward," she whispered, "I didn't want it to come to this." "I know," he replied softly, "but we can still resolve this without anyone getting hurt more." At that moment, Mary appeared beside Edward. Instead of the fury everyone expected, she walked directly to Sophia and hugged her with infinite tenderness. "My princess, how are you?" "Better now that Mommy's here," Sophia whispered, her color gradually returning to her face. Then Sophia did something no one expected. She extended her small hand toward Christine. "Ma'am, do you want to come here? Real hugs make the heart hurt less." Christine looked at that small hand extended toward her. A child she had kidnapped, who was suffering a cardiac crisis because of her, was offering her comfort. Something broke inside Christine at that moment. She broke down in sobs, falling to her knees on the dirty floor of the warehouse. I've become a monster," she cried. "How did I get to this point? How could I kidnap a child?" The two armed men lowered their weapons, clearly shaken by the purity of the scene they were witnessing. When the FBI arrived 15 minutes later, they found a completely peaceful situation. Christine had surrendered voluntarily, providing complete information about the entire criminal network she was part of. The two men also surrendered, declaring that they would never again get involved in crimes that hurt children. During the ride to the hospital, where Sophia needed immediate medical care to stabilize her heart condition, she held Edward and Mary's hands. "Daddy Edward, Mommy," she said with that wisdom that always impressed them, "I think Miss Christine wasn't really bad. I think her heart was very hurt just like mine, but her hurt wasn't in her body, it was in her soul." Edward looked out the ambulance window, seeing the city pass quickly. A 7-year-old child had just taught him the difference between justice and revenge, between punishment and redemption. Christine would be judged for her crimes, but Sophia had planted a seed of redemption that perhaps one day would transform that lost woman into someone capable of using her experiences to help others not make the same mistakes. The family that had been tested by fire emerged stronger, more united, and with a profound understanding that true love not only protects, it also transforms. 6 weeks after that cold Tuesday night that had changed 3 lives forever, Edward woke to the most beautiful sound in the world, children's laughter echoing through the corridors of his mansion. Sophia had completely recovered from her heart surgery and now ran through the gardens with the energy of any healthy 7-year-old. The house had completely transformed. Where an elegant but somber silence once reigned, now life pulsed in every room. Sophia's drawings decorated the walls next to expensive paintings. Colorful toys shared space with valuable antiques, and the kitchen always smelled of homemade food that Mary prepared with so much love. "Daddy Edward," Sophia shouted, running to hug him when he came down for breakfast. "Mommy said today we're going to visit Ms. Christine in jail. Can I bring the drawing I made for her?" Edward looked at Mary, who was arranging the breakfast table with that loving precision he had learned to cherish. In recent months, she had become much more than an employee. She was the matriarch of the family they had built together. He had offered her an executive position in his company, but Mary preferred to continue caring for the house, saying that her greatest talent was creating a home where people felt loved. "Of course you can take the drawing, Princess," Edward replied, kissing her forehead, "but remember that Ms. Christine is still very sad. She needs time for her heart to heal." During the months of the trial, something extraordinary had happened. Sophia had insisted on visiting Christine in prison, always bringing a new drawing and words of encouragement. Gradually, that woman who had become a monster driven by ambition and resentment began to remember who she was before losing her humanity. Christine had collaborated completely with the authorities, helping to dismantle the entire criminal network she was part of. Her sentence had been significantly reduced due to her cooperation and the evident process of redemption she was experiencing. More importantly, she had begun participating in therapy groups in prison, helping other women who had committed crimes out of desperation or manipulation. "Edward," Mary said softly, sitting beside him. "I received a letter from Christine yesterday. She said she's studying to become a counselor. She wants to help women who went through the same things she did." Edward smiled. Sophia was right from the beginning. Christine wasn't bad at heart. She was wounded and lost. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Robert, the private investigator who had become a close family friend. "Edward, I have interesting news. Remember those other men who were victims of Christine's scams? 3 of them contacted me. They want to meet Sophia." "Why?" "Because when they heard the story, how a 7-year-old child transformed this whole situation through forgiveness and kindness, they said they needed to learn from her. One of them has already donated $500,000 to the foundation you created in her name." Edward looked at Sophia, who was drawing peacefully at the kitchen table, completely oblivious to the impact her purity had caused in the lives of so many people. The Sophia Foundation had become the country's largest organization, assisting children with heart conditions, funding surgeries and treatments for hundreds of families who, like Mary, lacked the resources to care for their children. "Daddy Edward," Sophia called him. "I finished the drawing for Ms. Christine. Want to see?" The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a child. But this time there was a 4th figure a little ways off, with colorful tears streaming down her face. Above her, Sophia had written in her still, childish handwriting, "Sad people can become happy again if someone believes in them." Edward felt his eyes fill with tears. "It's beautiful, my princess. I think it will make Miss Christine's heart feel less heavy." Later, that day, when they visited Christine in prison, Edward observed a scene he would never forget. Sophia sat before the woman who had tried to destroy her family, and with the characteristic simplicity of a child, said, "Ms. Christine, I brought you a new drawing, and I wanted to say that when you get out of here, you can come live with us. If you want, big families are more fun." Christine broke down in tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not despair. "Sophia, you taught me that true kindness still exists in the world. When I get out of here, I'm going to dedicate my life to helping other people, just like you helped me." 6 months later, when Christine was released to serve the rest of her sentence under supervised release, she began working at the Sophia Foundation, using her experience and intelligence to identify and help vulnerable families. On the night of that first anniversary of Sophia's successful surgery, Edward found himself in the same office where everything had begun. The safe was there, but now it remained always open, containing only a framed letter Sophia had written. For him, "Dear Daddy by heart, thank you for believing that poor people can also be honest. Thank you for teaching me that families don't need to share the same blood, they just need to share the same love. And thank you for showing me that even people who do bad things can learn to do good things again. Love you forever, Sophia." Edward closed his eyes and heard laughter coming from the garden, where Mary and Sophia were playing with the other children who now regularly frequented the house, beneficiaries of the foundation who had become part of the extended family that never stopped growing. Sometimes the greatest treasures are discovered in moments of greatest temptation. The safe that was used to test integrity had become a symbol that true wealth cannot be hoarded. It needs to be shared to multiply. Edward had learned that prejudices Our prisons we build in our own minds, and that sometimes it's the purest hearts that face the greatest challenges. Sophia discovered that her honesty, even when no one seemed to be looking, had the power to awaken consciences and transform lives. Mary found dignity and purpose, understanding that raising a daughter with solid values had been her greatest achievement. And Christine learned that exploiting others' kindness always comes at a high price, but that redemption is possible when we find someone willing to believe in our capacity for change. The test that began as a trap based on prejudice transformed into the foundation of a true family, proving that when we test the character of others, we are actually revealing our own, and that the honesty of a child can be more powerful than all the manipulation of unscrupulous adults. That night, as he tucked Sophia into bed, Edward heard her murmur her usual prayers. "Dear Lord, thank you for my family. Thank you for letting my heart get better. And thank you for showing me that when you do good, good comes back to you twofold." Edward kissed her forehead and whispered, "Good night, my little life teacher." Outside, the stars shone over the mansion that had ceased to be just a house, to become a home where true love always conquered darkness.